What would you do if the man you gave up everything for your dreams, your career, your youth, left you for a younger model, and then had the audacity to flaunt her in your face at the most public event of the year? For Amelia Hayes, this wasn't a nightmare. It was her reality. She stood there a ghost in a borrowed dress watching her ex-husband Julian Vance parade his new bride like a trophy. She felt the world shrinking, the whispers of the elite cutting deeper than any knife. But what no one in that glittering ballroom knew, least of all Julian, was that a single letter sitting unopened on her modest coffee table was about to change everything. Her humiliation was about to become his greatest regret. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Astoria ballroom dripped light onto the city's elite, a constellation of wealth and power. For Amelia Hayes, the light felt interrogating, exposing the frayed hem of her confidence. 2 years post-divorce, she was here on a charity ticket, a courtesy from a friend who thought it would be good for her to get out. In reality, it felt like a cruel diorama of the life that had been stolen from her. She was nursing a glass of sparkling water, trying to look absorbed in the silent auction bids, when a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The cameras at the entrance flashed in a frenzy, a supernova of light heralding the arrival of a new king and queen. Julian Vance, her ex-husband, stepped onto the marble floor. He was more handsome than she remembered, his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit clinging to a frame honed by personal trainers she used to schedule. He oozed the kind of success she had helped build brick by painful brick. And on his arm, dripping in diamonds that Amelia knew were paid for by the company she co-founded, was Tiffany Dubois. Tiffany was barely 24, a lifetime away from Amelia's 40. She was a sunrise, all golden skin and effortless grace, her laughter tinkling like the champagne flutes around them. She wore a crimson gown that left little to the imagination, a stark contrast to Amelia's elegant but understated navy blue dress. They were the picture of modern success, the tech mogul and his influencer bride. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. She had known this might happen, but the reality was a physical blow. She remembered the nights she'd spent editing Julian's business proposals until her eyes burned, the savings she'd poured into his first startup, the dreams of being a renowned architectural restorer she'd put on hold to be Mrs. Vance. He had promised her it was a partnership. "We're a team, Ames," he used to say. "When I win, you win." But when he won, he cashed her out for a newer model. The divorce had been brutal. Julian's lawyers painted her as a freeloader, a bitter woman clinging to a lifestyle she hadn't earned. She walked away with a pittance, just enough to rent a small apartment and restart her restoration consultancy on a shoestring budget, while he kept the penthouse, the company, and their entire history. Now he was working the room, Tiffany attached to his side like a charm. He caught Amelia's eye across the crowd. There was no flicker of recognition, no hint of shared history. Just a cold, dismissive glance, before he turned back to laugh at something Tiffany whispered in his ear. He then did something that shattered the last of Amelia's composure. He took Tiffany's hand, raised it to his lips, and kissed her diamond-encrusted fingers, his eyes still locked on Amelia's. It was a deliberate act of cruelty. A public declaration. "You are nothing. This is my victory." The whispers started subtle but sharp. "Is that Amelia Hayes, Julian's ex? God, she looks so tired. You can't compete with youth, can you?" Amelia's face burned. She wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. She turned to make a quiet exit, but her path was blocked by Beatrice Albright, a society matron whose tongue was as sharp as her diamond earrings. "Amelia, darling," Beatrice purred, her eyes flicking between Amelia and the golden couple. "How brave of you to come. Julian and Tiffany are simply radiant, aren't they? He looks so unburdened." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart. Unburdened. That's what she was to him now, a burden he had shed. Amelia forced a tight-lipped smile. "Beatrice, they do look happy." She could feel her voice trembling. She had to get out. She excused herself, her heart hammering against her ribs, and fled towards the exit, not daring to look back. The sound of their tinkling laughter seemed to follow her all the way out into the cold, unforgiving night. Back in her small, quiet apartment, the borrowed dress felt like a costume for a life she no longer lived. She sank onto her sofa, the city lights a blur through her tear-filled eyes. She was alone, humiliated, and invisible. At 40, her life felt like it was already over. On her coffee table, nestled between a stack of bills and a library book, sat a thick, cream-colored envelope with an embossed return address, Finch and Sterling, LLP. She had glanced at it earlier, assuming it was a solicitation, and had tossed it aside. Tonight she was too broken to even care. The morning after the gala was a study in gray. A dull, persistent drizzle wept against Amelia's apartment window, mirroring the hollow ache in her chest. The memory of Julian's smug smile and Tiffany's radiant youth was a fresh wound. She felt irrelevant, a footnote in the grand story of Julian Vance's success. She forced herself to make coffee, the familiar ritual, a small anchor in a sea of despair. Her life was now a loop of chasing invoices, pitching for small restoration projects on historic homes, and fighting the creeping dread that she had sacrificed her best years for a man who now looked at her like a stranger. As the coffee maker gurgled, her eyes fell on the envelope again. Finch and Sterling, LLP. The name was vaguely familiar, like something from an old movie. It felt solid, permanent, a stark contrast to the flimsy, transient nature of her current life. Curiosity, a feeling she hadn't experienced in months, finally pricked through her apathy. She picked it up. The paper was heavy, expensive. It wasn't junk mail. With a tremor of apprehension, she slid it open with a kitchen knife. The letter inside was typed on the same luxurious paper, the words formal and stark. Dear Ms. Amelia Hayes, this correspondence is to inform you of the passing of your great-uncle, Mr. Arthur Blackwood. We, the firm of Finch and Sterling, are the executors of Mr. Blackwood's estate. It is imperative that you contact our offices at your earliest convenience to schedule a meeting with our senior partner, Mr. Alistair Finch, regarding the reading and execution of Mr. Blackwood's last will and testament. Please be advised that your presence is a matter of significant urgency. Amelia sank into a kitchen chair, the letter trembling in her hand. Arthur Blackwood. She hadn't heard that name in decades. He was her grandmother's brother, a reclusive, almost mythical figure from her childhood. She remembered meeting him once at a family funeral when she was about 10. He had been a tall, severe-looking man with piercing blue eyes who didn't say much. He had given her a beautifully illustrated leather-bound copy of The Secret Garden and told her, "Always tend to the things others neglect. That's where the real beauty is." Her family had lost touch with him years ago. They said he was eccentric, a wealthy investor who lived a quiet life somewhere in New England after making a fortune in the early days of computing and then in shrewd long-term investments. They considered him a recluse who wanted nothing to do with them. Why would he name her in his will? And what did significant urgency mean? She probably inherited a dusty old clock or set of books. Still, it was a distraction, a mystery. She found the number on the letterhead and dialed, half expecting a recording. A crisp, human voice answered immediately. Finch and Sterling, how may I direct your call? Hello, my name is Amelia Hayes. I received a letter about Mr. Arthur Blackwood. The change in the receptionist's tone was immediate. The polite efficiency warmed into something resembling reverence. Ms. Hayes, of course. Mr. Finch has been anticipating your call. He can see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock if that is amenable. It felt like being pulled into another world. Yes, 10 o'clock is fine. The next morning, Amelia stood before a formidable limestone building in the heart of the financial district. The brass plaque read, Finch and Sterling Est, 1922. It was a world away from Julian's sleek glass and steel tech empire. This place spoke of old money, of legacies that spanned generations. Inside the office was a cathedral of mahogany and leather. A grandfather clock ticked solemnly in the corner. A young paralegal escorted her to a corner office with a sweeping view of the city. Alistair Finch rose from behind a massive desk. He was a man in his late 60s, with a mane of white hair and the same kind of piercing blue eyes she remembered from her great-uncle. He was impeccably dressed in a three-piece tweed suit. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice a low, comforting baritone. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I am Alistair Finch. I was your great-uncle's lawyer, and I was also his friend." He gestured for her to sit in a plush leather armchair. He didn't engage in small talk. He slid a heavy document bound in a blue cover across the desk. "Amelia," he began, his tone softening. "Arthur was a very private man. He didn't maintain many family ties, but he did observe. He was aware of your life, your career choices, and your recent difficulties." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "He knew about my divorce. He knew you were a woman of substance and integrity who had been dealt a severe injustice," Finch corrected gently. "He admired your passion for restoration. He often said you were the only one in the family who understood the value of preserving the past. He saw your work not as a hobby, but as a calling." Finch paused, letting the words sink in. "Arthur never married and had no children. He spent his life building a considerable fortune, and he was very particular about what would happen to it after his passing. He wanted his legacy to be in the hands of someone who would nurture it, not squander it. Someone who tends to the things others neglect." He tapped the document. "This is his last will and testament. It is quite straightforward. He has left a few small bequests to various charities and his longtime staff. The remainder, the entirety of the Blackwood estate, he has left to you." Amelia stared at him, confused. "The remainder. What does that mean? His house? A few $1,000s?" Alistair Finch looked at her, his expression a mixture of solemnity and something that looked like gentle pity for what she was about to experience. "Amelia," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Arthur Blackwood was not simply a wealthy man. By the time of his passing, his portfolio of investments, real estate holdings, and private equity stakes were valued at an estimated $2.7 billion. The number hung in the silent wood-paneled office like a ghost. $2.7 billion. Amelia heard the words, but her brain refused to assemble them into a coherent thought. It was a sum so vast, so astronomical, that it felt like a clerical error. A joke. She looked at Alistair Finch, expecting him to crack a smile to tell her he'd misspoken. But his face was earnest, his blue eyes unwavering. I'm sorry," she stammered, the room suddenly feeling too warm. "I think I must have misheard you. Did you say billion?" "Yes, Ms. Hayes, with a B." Finch confirmed, his voice calm and steady, a rock in her swirling sea of disbelief. "It is a significant fortune, and it is now yours." He gestured to the document on the desk. "Of course it's more complex than just a number. The Blackwood estate comprises a diversified portfolio of stocks in blue-chip companies, controlling interests in several private technology and green energy firms, a collection of priceless art and antiques, and significant real estate holdings." He slid a second, thicker file towards her. It was a preliminary asset summary. She opened it numbly. The words swam before her eyes. "The Blackwood Manor, a 200-acre estate in Vermont. A historic brownstone on the Upper East Side, New York City. A vineyard in Napa Valley. A penthouse apartment in London overlooking Hyde Park. A villa on the coast of Italy." It was an inventory for a life she couldn't even imagine. Just last week, her biggest financial concern had been whether she could afford to have the sputtering engine of her 10-year-old Honda Civic looked at. Now she owned a vineyard. "Why?" The word escaped her as a hoarse whisper. "Why me? He barely knew me." "He knew more than you think," Finch replied, leaning forward. "Arthur was a man who valued character above all else. He loathed the new brand of ostentatious hollow wealth. He saw your ex-husband Julian as the embodiment of that world, all flash, no foundation. He saw how you poured your soul into building his dream only to be discarded when he achieved it." Finch opened a drawer and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was of Amelia years ago, smiling, her face smudged with plaster dust as she worked on restoring a historic church fresco. "He kept this," Finch said softly. "A relative sent it to him. He told me, 'Look at her. She creates value. She finds beauty in what is broken and makes it whole again. Her husband sells pixels and empty promises. She restores history. He watched your struggles after the divorce, how you started your own small business with dignity, refusing to be broken. He saw in you the same quiet strength and appreciation for lasting value that he prided himself on." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. It wasn't just about the money. It was the validation. For years, Julian had made her feel small, as if her passion was a quaint little hobby compared to his world-changing ambitions. But this quiet, distant man had seen her. He had truly seen her. "There are, of course, stipulations," Finch continued, bringing her back to the present. "He established the Blackwood Foundation, a charitable trust to be funded by a portion of the estate's annual earnings. He has named you as the chairperson. Its mandate is broad: the preservation of historical architecture and the support of traditional artisans. It was his final gift to you, not just the wealth, but a purpose for it that aligns with your own soul." He pushed a pen across the desk. "There are many documents to be signed. This first set is the most important. They are the acceptance forms officially transferring executorship of the estate to you. Once you sign these, the process begins. The assets will be transferred into a trust under your name. You will become, for all intents and purposes, one of the wealthiest women in the country." Amelia stared at the pen, then at the signature line waiting for her. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. She thought of the gala, of Julian's cruel, dismissive eyes, of Tiffany's blinding diamonds, of Beatrice Albright's pitying sneer. She thought of the condescending tone of Julian's lawyers as they'd picked apart her life, valuing her contribution to a decade-long marriage at a mere pittance. This signature was not just a legal act. It was an act of rebellion. It was the closing of a chapter of humiliation and the opening of one of unimaginable power. Her ex-wife, the one he'd cast aside as a failure, the tired-looking woman in the borrowed dress, was about to become infinitely more powerful than he could ever dream of being. She took a deep breath, the air filling her lungs with a newfound strength. Her hand was steady now. The pen felt solid and real. With a firm, deliberate stroke, she signed her name, Amelia Hayes. The ink was black and final. The sound of the pen scratching against the heavy paper was the only noise in the room. It was the sound of a world shifting on its axis. Finch smiled, a genuine warm expression. "Welcome to your new life, Ms. Hayes. I believe we have a great deal of work to do." The days following the signing were a blur of meetings, legal jargon, and staggering numbers. Amelia felt like she was learning a new language, the language of wealth. Portfolio managers, tax attorneys, and security consultants moved in and out of Alistair Finch's office, all treating her with a deferential respect that was both unnerving and deeply satisfying. Her first act wasn't one of revenge or extravagance. It was one of quiet reclamation. She called the bank that held the mortgage on her parents' old home, a beautiful Victorian house Julian had insisted they sell during the divorce to liquidate shared assets, a sale that had broken her heart. She learned it was back on the market. "I'd like to make an offer," she told the real estate agent, her voice even. "We have several competitive offers already, ma'am," the agent said dismissively. "I'll pay cash," Amelia said simply. 20% above the asking price, and I want the sale closed by the end of the week." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. By Friday, the keys to her childhood home were in her hand. Walking through the empty rooms, tracing the patterns on the stained glass windows, she felt a piece of her soul click back into place. This was real. Her next move was for her business. She had been operating Hayes Restorations out of her small apartment, struggling to compete for minor jobs. Now she instructed one of her new financial advisors to lease the entire top floor of a historic brick building downtown. She hired a small expert team of artisans she had long admired but could never afford, offering them salaries and benefits that made their jaws drop. She wasn't just restarting her business. She was building an institution. Amelia herself began to change. The perpetual anxiety that had hunched her shoulders began to dissipate. She bought new clothes, not flashy designer labels, but beautifully tailored pieces from classic, understated brands that made her feel confident and poised. She started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. The weight of her new responsibilities was immense, but it was a purposeful weight unlike the crushing, pointless weight of Julian's betrayal. Alistair Finch became her guide and confidant. He shared stories of Arthur Blackwood painting a picture of a brilliant, principled man who had found the noise of modern society distasteful. He believed money was a tool, not a scorecard, Alistair explained over lunch one day. He saw Julian on the cover of a business magazine and told me, "That man is a high-stakes gambler playing with other people's money. He builds nothing that lasts." He would be so pleased with what you're doing, Amelia. Buying back your family home, building your business from the ground up. You're putting down roots, not just flying at altitude. The news of a mystery heiress inheriting the legendary Blackwood fortune began to ripple through the financial world. At first it was just whispers on Wall Street blind items and gossip columns. No one knew her name, only that she was a long-lost relative who had suddenly become a major player. The secrecy was a deliberate strategy by Finch to give Amelia time to acclimate. But in a world connected by whispers and data, secrets never last. Julian Vance was on top of the world. His company, Innovate, was preparing for a new round of funding that would skyrocket its valuation. He and Tiffany were the darlings of the tech and social scenes, their every move documented by paparazzi and envious bloggers. He hadn't thought about Amelia in months, except for the fleeting, satisfying memory of her pained face at the gala. She was a relic of his past, a necessary stepping stone he had climbed over and forgotten. He first heard the rumor at his exclusive club. A group of venture capitalists were discussing the Blackwood estate. "Can you believe it? Arthur Blackwood was sitting on nearly $3 billion, one said, and he left it all to some unknown niece or something. No one knows who she is." "Finch and Sterling have her locked down tight," another added. "But whoever she is, she just became one of the biggest private equity players overnight. The Blackwood portfolio has kingmaker-level stakes in a dozen industries." Julian was intrigued but detached. It was just another story of old money changing hands. A week later, however, a financial journalist he knew called him for a comment. "Julian, I'm working on a piece about the Blackwood heiress," the journalist said. "We're trying to confirm her identity. Our sources say she's a relative from his estranged sister's side. The family name is Hayes." The name hit Julian like a punch to the gut. Hayes. It couldn't be. He forced a laugh. "Hayes is a common name. Good luck with that." But the seed of a terrifying, exhilarating idea had been planted. He spent the rest of the day in a cold sweat, his mind racing. Amelia. His mousy, defeated Amelia, inheriting a fortune that dwarfed his own. It was impossible. It was absurd. He hired a private investigator, sparing no expense. "Find out who inherited Arthur Blackwood's money. I need to know everything." The report came back in less than 48 hours. It was a single page with a recent photograph attached. The photo showed Amelia walking out of the Finch and Sterling building. She looked different. Her hair was styled, her posture was erect, and she wore a camel hair coat that screamed quiet luxury. She looked powerful. The report was blunt. "Amelia Hayes, 40, architectural restorer, is the sole beneficiary of the Blackwood estate. Estimated net worth $2.7 billion. Julian stared at the report, his world tilting on its axis. He wasn't filled with happiness for her or even simple shock. He was consumed by a blinding, furious wave of possessiveness. His ex-wife, his mousy little Amelia, was a billionaire. The money, the power, the connections, they should have been his. He had been married to her. He was entitled to it. His mind began to spin, the gears of his manipulative charm grinding into motion. He hadn't just made a mistake divorcing her. He had made a cataclysmic financial blunder. That evening, Tiffany was showing him a new haul from a shopping spree on Rodeo Drive. "Look, Julie, it's the new Birkin. There was a 6-month wait list, but the manager knows me, so—" Julian barely heard her. He looked at her, at the designer bag, at the vapid smiling face, and for the first time he saw her not as a trophy, but as a liability. A very, very expensive liability. "Tiffany," he said, his voice cold. "We need to talk." He saw the future clearly now. He hadn't lost a wife. He had lost a winning lottery ticket. And he was going to do whatever it took to get it back. His new plan began to form a venomous, calculated strategy to win back Amelia's trust, and with it, her fortune. Amelia was overseeing the final touches on the restoration of a historic library's reading room, a project funded by the newly established Blackwood Foundation, when her assistant approached her looking flustered. "Ms. Hayes," she said hesitantly, "there's a Mr. Vance here to see you. He says it's personal." Amelia felt a cold dread snake up her spine. Julian. Here. She hadn't seen or spoken to him since the gala. She considered refusing, but a new steely resolve had taken root in her heart. She wasn't the scared, broken woman from the Astoria ballroom anymore. "Send him in," she said, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. Julian walked into the vast, sun-drenched room, the scent of his expensive cologne, a jarring intrusion among the familiar smells of old wood and lemon oil. He had a carefully curated look of contrition on his face. He was holding a bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers he used to buy her after a fight. The gesture was so transparently manipulative it was almost laughable. "Ames," he began, his voice a low, intimate murmur he had once used to such devastating effect. "You look incredible, truly." "What do you want, Julian?" Amelia asked, her tone flat. She didn't invite him to sit. She stood her ground, a faint dusting of plaster on her blazer, a symbol of her new world. "I came to apologize," he said, taking a step closer. She didn't move back. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about what I lost, the gala, seeing you there. It made me realize what a fool I've been. I was drowning in the pressure, the expectations. I lost my way. I lost you." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Every word was designed to tug at old heartstrings, to evoke a shared history he had so casually incinerated. "You didn't lose me, Julian," Amelia stated calmly. "You threw me away. There's a difference." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "That's not fair, Ames. We were a team. I always said that. And I know the divorce was messy. I let the lawyers get out of control. But in my heart, I never stopped caring about you." He glanced around the magnificent room. "And look at you now. I heard about your inheritance. I am so happy for you. You deserve it. You always deserve the world." Then came the pivot, the true purpose of his visit. "I just feel like that kind of wealth, that power. It comes with sharks, Ames. People will try to take advantage of you. You need someone you can trust, someone who knows that world, someone who has your back." He paused, his eyes pleading. "I want to be that person. Let me help you. Help. We can be a team again, stronger than ever." Amelia looked at him. Truly. Looked at him, and for the first time she felt nothing. No pain, no lingering affection, only a profound and chilling clarity. She saw the predator beneath the polished veneer, the avarice glittering in his eyes. He wasn't here for her. He was here for the Blackwood estate. He was hunting. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of warmth, but of power. "No, thank you, Julian," she said, her voice as cool and clear as glass. "No." He seemed genuinely shocked, as if this outcome had never entered his calculations. "No," she repeated. "You're right about one thing. This kind of wealth attracts sharks, and I'm looking at the most dangerous one right now. You don't care about me. You care about what I have. You smell money and you came running just like you always do." His mask of contrition shattered, replaced by a flash of his familiar arrogant anger. "That's ridiculous. After everything I did for you. Everything you did." Amelia cut him off, a spark of fire in her voice now. Let me remind you, Julian, I was the one who worked 2 jobs while you wrote your business plan. I was the one whose savings were your seed money. I was the one who gave up my own career to support yours. You didn't build your empire alone. You built it on my back. And the moment it was stable, you replaced me. From the arched doorway behind Julian, a figure appeared. It was Tiffany. She looked pale and uncertain, her usual bubbly confidence completely gone. She had clearly followed him. "Julie," she asked, her voice small, "what's going on?" Julian spun around, his face a mask of fury at being interrupted. But Amelia's eyes were locked on Tiffany. She didn't see a rival anymore. She saw a young woman standing exactly where she had stood years ago, oblivious to the true nature of the man she was with. Amelia spoke directly to Tiffany, her voice softening with a touch of pity. "He's telling me how much he misses me, how we were a team, how he wants to help me manage my newfound fortune." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Is that what he told you when he left me for you, that we were a team?" Tiffany's face crumpled. The illusion was broken. She looked at Julian, at his angry, cornered expression, and then back at Amelia's calm, powerful stance. For the first time, Tiffany understood. She wasn't the victor. She was just the next victim. "Julian," Amelia said, her voice now sharp with finality, turning her attention back to him, "our business is concluded. I have my life back, a life you have no part in. Please see yourself out, and take your lilies with you. They always made me sneeze." Defeated and exposed, Julian Vance stood there, stripped of his charm and his power. He grabbed a stunned Tiffany by the arm and stormed out of the library, leaving only the cloying scent of his cologne and the discarded bouquet of lilies on the floor. Amelia watched them go, not with triumph, but with the quiet, profound peace of a battle finally won. In the year that followed, the world learned Amelia Hayes's name. But she wasn't on the covers of tabloids or featured in society columns. Instead, she was in architectural digests and philanthropy journals. The Blackwood Foundation became a formidable force for good, saving dozens of historic buildings from the wrecking ball and creating apprenticeship programs that breathed new life into dying arts, like stonemasonry, stained glass restoration, and traditional carpentry. Amelia found her purpose not in spending her fortune, but in investing it. She traveled not to lavish resorts, but to crumbling castles in Scotland and decaying palazzos in Venice, directing her teams with an expert eye and a quiet passion that earned her global respect. She was no longer Julian Vance's ex-wife. She was the guardian of Arthur Blackwood's legacy and the creator of her own. The news about Julian came in fragmented reports. His grand funding round for Innovate had fallen through. The whispers started that his company's valuation was wildly inflated, a house of cards built on hype and projected earnings that never materialized. His reputation as a visionary began to tarnish. He was seen as reckless a gambler. The investors who had once clamored for a piece of his company now ran for the exits. Tiffany left him, her departure announced in a short, terse post on Instagram that spoke of seeking authenticity. The divorce was swift and public, with Tiffany's lawyers ensuring she got her share before the entire empire crumbled. The final blow came 6 months later. Innovate filed for bankruptcy. The sleek headquarters was shuttered, the employees laid off. Julian Vance, the man who had graced the cover of magazines, the titan of tech, was ruined. He was last seen moving out of a rented condo, his custom suits replaced by worn jeans, his face etched with a bitterness that had aged him a decade. He had squandered everything in his pursuit of more. One crisp autumn afternoon, Amelia was standing on the scaffolding of a centuries-old theater her foundation was restoring. The city skyline stretched out before her, a testament to ambition and change. She looked down at her hands, no longer soft and manicured, but strong and capable, often smudged with the honest dirt of her work. Alistair Finch stood beside her. "Quite a view," he commented. "Yes," Amelia agreed. "It is." "I received a letter this morning," Alistair said casually, "from Julian Vance's bankruptcy lawyer. a desperate last-ditch inquiry. They were trying to make a legal claim that as his ex-wife, a portion of your inheritance could be considered a marital asset. Amelia didn't even turn. She just smiled faintly. "And what did you tell them, Alistair?" "I told them," he said with a chuckle, "that Mr. Vance had already settled his claim on your life and that the valuation he agreed to at the time was final. I believe the legal term I used was profoundly and irrevocably mistaken." They shared a quiet laugh. The sound echoed in the vast empty theater that would soon be filled with life again. Julian was no longer a shadow in her life. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale. He had spent his life building things that were designed to be replaced Kodak's public image. She was building things that were meant to last for centuries. She had learned the lesson her great-uncle Arthur had tried to teach her all those years ago when he'd handed her that book. The real treasures are not the things that glitter, but the things that endure. And in restoring the neglected beauty of the past, Amelia Hayes had finally and completely restored herself. Life for Amelia had settled into a rhythm of profound purpose. She split her time between the bustling headquarters of the Blackwood Foundation in New York and the various restoration sites she personally oversaw across the country. She was no longer a subject of pity or gossip, but a respected figure in the worlds of philanthropy and historical preservation. The name Amelia Hayes now stood for something solid, enduring, and graceful. The ghost of Julian Vance had, she believed, been fully exorcised. She was at the reopening ceremony of a magnificent 1920s Art Deco theater in Chicago, a project the foundation had saved from demolition. Standing at the podium addressing a crowd of city officials, donors, and journalists, she felt a sense of peace. She spoke of the theater not as a building of brick and mortar, but as a vessel of community memory, a place where generations had shared dreams in the flickering dark. The applause was thunderous and genuine. It was later that evening in her hotel suite that the echo of her past returned, not as a whisper but as a belligerent shout. Alistair Finch called his usually calm voice tight with controlled anger. "Amelia, I'm sorry to disturb your evening," he began, "but there's something you need to see. It's going to be all over the internet by morning." He sent her a link to an online tabloid, a notorious publication known for its sensationalism. The headline splashed in lurid yellow and black read, "Jilted Husband Tells All. How My Ex-Wife Billionaire Heiress Amelia Hayes Schemed to Steal a Dying Man's Fortune." Beneath it was a professionally shot photograph of Julian. He looked thinner, his face artfully arranged into an expression of weary victimhood. The article was a masterpiece of malicious fiction woven with just enough half-truth to seem plausible to the uninformed. Julian claimed their marriage had fallen apart because of Amelia's unhealthy obsession with her reclusive elderly great-uncle. He painted her not as a dedicated artist, but as a cunning social climber who, seeing her husband's star rise, decided to aim for an even bigger prize. She would visit him in secret, one fabricated quote read. She'd come back and talk about the Blackwood legacy, about how I, a new money tech guy, could never understand true class. She poisoned the old man against me, preying on his isolation and his failing health. She painted me as a monster so she could position herself as his savior. Our divorce wasn't about another woman. It was about her cold, calculated ambition. I didn't leave her. She had already left our marriage for a dying man's checkbook. He even twisted her love for restoration. She was always obsessed with old things. Broken things, he was quoted as saying. I think she saw Arthur Blackwood as her ultimate restoration project with a multi-billion-dollar payout. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. It was a vile, poisonous narrative that struck at the very heart of her identity and the honor of the man who had saved her. Julian couldn't attack her wealth, so he was attacking her character. He was trying to defile the one thing he could never touch, the genuine, quiet respect between her and her great-uncle. The fallout was immediate. The story was picked up by more mainstream gossip blogs. The comment sections were a cesspool of judgment. "Knew there was more to the story," one read. "Classic gold digger," said another. By the next day, the whispers had reached her professional life. A board member of a museum she was collaborating with called for a brief pause to allow the dust to settle. A journalist who had been glowing in his praise the night before now asked for a comment on the troubling allegations. Julian had found her vulnerability. She had built a fortress of wealth and purpose, but he was attacking its foundations with lies. He was trying to turn her inheritance, a gift of validation, into a mark of shame. Alistair Finch advised a course of dignified silence. "It's a tabloid, Amelia. To respond is to give it legitimacy. It will blow over." For a day she tried to take his advice, but the slander festered. Julian wasn't just attacking her. He was desecrating the memory of Arthur Blackwood, painting a kind, principled, and intensely sharp-minded man as a senile puppet. She thought of Arthur's piercing blue eyes, of his one piece of advice to her as a child: always tend to the things others neglect. Julian was trying to neglect his memory to break his legacy. She would not allow it. "No, Alistair," she said on the phone the following evening, her voice ringing with a newfound cold fury. "I will not be silent while he exhumes a good man's name for his own pathetic revenge. This isn't about me. It's about Arthur. I am not going to let these lies be the final word on his story." "A libel suit would be long and messy," Alistair warned. "It's exactly the circus he wants." "I know," Amelia said, a plan beginning to form in her mind, a plan that felt true to both herself and her benefactor. "I'm not going to sue him. I'm going to bury him. Not with lawyers, but with the truth. I'm going to the Blackwood Manor in Vermont. I need to find something in Arthur's own words." She had managed the estate from a distance, preserving the house as a private memorial. She had never felt ready to step fully into his personal space. But now she wasn't just his heiress. She was his defender, and she was going into the heart of his world to find the weapon she needed. The Blackwood Manor was not a palace of ostentatious wealth, but a grand, sprawling stone house, nestled among ancient maple and oak trees in the Vermont countryside. It was dignified, private, and timeless, much like the man who had lived there. As Amelia drove up the long gravel driveway, she felt a sense of coming home to a place she'd never been. The house was kept in perfect order by a small, loyal staff who had served Arthur for decades. The housekeeper, a warm, elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, greeted her with tears in her eyes. "He would be so proud of you, Ms. Hayes. What that man is saying in the papers, it's a wicked sin." Amelia spent the first day simply walking through the rooms, absorbing the quiet atmosphere. The house was filled with books, maps, and art that spoke of a curious and brilliant mind. There was nothing flashy or ostentatious. It was the home of a man who valued substance above all. His study was her final destination. It was a magnificent two-story room lined wall-to-wall with books. A large oak desk stood before a bay window that overlooked the rolling hills. It felt like a sanctuary. This was the mind of Arthur Blackwood. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for. A letter. A misplaced document. She ran her hand along the spines of his books, feeling a connection to him she never had in life. For hours she searched. Finally, Mrs. Gable brought her a cup of tea. "If you're looking for the heart of him, miss," the housekeeper said softly, "it wouldn't be out in the open. He was a very private man. He had a safe behind the Emerson volumes." She pointed to a section of the bookshelf. Behind a row of leather-bound Ralph Waldo Emerson essays, Amelia found a small, discreet wall safe. The combination, Mrs. Gable told her, was the date of the Battle of Hastings, 1066. Inside there were no gold bars or bearer bonds. Instead, there was a stack of about a dozen thick leather-bound journals. They were filled cover to cover with Arthur Blackwood's elegant, precise handwriting dating back nearly 50 years. Amelia sat at his desk and opened the most recent one. She began to read, and as she did, the quiet, observant man came to life. He wrote about the stock market, about politics, about bird-watching, and about books. And then she found what she was looking for. She found herself. October 14th, 2015. Had a call from my grandniece Amelia. Her wedding invitation. The man is Julian Vance. I looked him up. All flash, no fire. He sells digital ephemera and calls himself a visionary. A man with a salesman's smile and an empty soul. He will build his success, and when he feels it is complete, he will discard the scaffolding. I worry for her. She has a good heart, a creator's spirit. Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. He had seen it from the very beginning. She kept reading, flipping through the years. June 22, 2023. News that Julian Vance has left Amelia for a younger woman. Unsurprising. A man like that only values appreciating assets, and he is too foolish to understand that character and loyalty appreciate more than youth. He failed to realize his wife was his greatest asset. I see from her public filings she has started a small restoration business. Good. Steel is forged in fire. She has the Blackwood resilience. Tears streamed down Amelia's face. He had been watching over her, respecting her struggle from afar. Then she found the final entries written in a slightly shakier hand just months before he passed. February 5, 2025. Alistair is concerned about my will. He suggests a competency evaluation to head off any potential challenges. Amusing. My mind is as clear as a Vermont winter morning. I know precisely what I am doing. This fortune is a responsibility, a tool. It needs a caretaker, not a showman. It needs someone who tends to the things that last. It needs Amelia. She will not be corrupted by it. She will give it purpose. She will understand. This was it. This was the truth. It was more powerful than any legal argument or public relations statement. It was Arthur's voice, clear and unassailable from beyond the grave. The next week, Amelia did something she had never done before. She agreed to a live, exclusive interview with Diana Sterling, a respected journalist known for her tough but fair approach. The nation, intrigued by the scandal, tuned in. Diana began with the allegations. Amelia, your ex-husband Julian Vance claims you manipulated a vulnerable elderly man to secure your inheritance. What is your response? Amelia was poised and calm. Julian is a gifted storyteller. She began, her voice steady. He has built a compelling story of his own victimhood. But it's just that, a story. The truth is quieter, but it is far more powerful. I did not know my great-uncle well in person, but I have come to know him through his words, and I would like to share them with you. She opened a folder, and with the camera in tight focus, she read the entries from Arthur Blackwood's journals. She read his initial assessment of Julian, his quiet pride in her resilience after the divorce, and his final clear-eyed reasoning for making her his heir. There was a stunned silence in the studio when she finished. Her voice was thick with emotion, but she did not break. That is the man Julian Vance calls a senile puppet, she said softly. A man who saw through him a decade ago. My great-uncle's legacy is not just his fortune. It is his wisdom and his integrity. I am not its owner. I am its caretaker. And I will not allow a desperate, cruel man to tarnish his memory for a fleeting moment of public attention. The effect was devastating. Julian wasn't just defeated. He was annihilated, exposed as a petty, vindictive liar by the words of the very man he had tried to slander. The public tide turned instantly and ferociously against him. He became a pariah, a joke. No one would fund him. No one would hire him. No one would even take his calls. He vanished from public life utterly and finally disgraced. Amelia stood on the porch of the Blackwood Manor a few weeks later, looking out at the fiery colors of the Vermont autumn. The journals were safe. Her great-uncle's name was cleared, and her future was her own. She was no longer a restorer of buildings, but a restorer of legacies, his and now hers. The echoes of her past were silent at last, replaced by the quiet, promising rustle of the turning leaves. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can be the foundation for our greatest triumphs. It's a testament to the idea that true worth isn't measured by the person on your arm or the balance in your bank account, but by the integrity in your heart and the purpose you build with your own two hands. She was discarded, humiliated, and left with nothing, but she never lost herself. And when the world turned, she didn't choose revenge. She chose to build a legacy of beauty and strength. Her journey teaches us that the ultimate victory is not just being proven right, but living a life so full and meaningful that the past simply has no power over you anymore. If you were moved by Amelia's incredible journey from heartbreak to empowerment, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that their best days are still ahead. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of real-life twists, resilience, and the sweet, unexpected taste of justice. Thank you for listening. Thank you.